to Through the Keyhole with your host, Karen Dolan, on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you may be. This is Through the Keyhole, coming to you from Rochester, New York, between the Great Lakes and the Finger Lakes. I'm your host, Karen Dolan, and I want to thank you today for joining me on Paranormal Radio Network. If you're here with me in the northeastern United States, you can see that we're enjoying some beautiful fall colors now. And I sincerely hope Guy Malone of Live from Roswell is listening today, because it's finally his turn to be jealous of the weather we have here. I'm getting sick and tired of hearing how beautiful and hot and sunny it is down in Roswell, and it's usually raining up here. Just wanted to mention one quick announcement. Next week, Rich and I are going to be out of the country, so I will not be broadcasting a new show on October 7th. However, this fall weather means it's almost time for UNISCON 6, the big paranormal conference hosted by the Penn State Paranormal Research Society, which is coming up October 18th through the 21st. So, in honor of that, next week we're going to replay the debut program of Through the Keyhole, in which I interviewed Ryan Buell, the founder of Penn State PRS. Be sure to listen in if you missed it the first time around, because due to space constraints, they have not been able to keep all of the shows up on the archives. We've had to take down some of the early ones. So this one has come down, and you'll be able to hear it again next week to get you all the information you need about this conference, including some news about some very special guest speakers they've got this year. Speaking of very special guests, my guest today here on Through the Keyhole is Mr. Carl Feint. He's been fascinated by aviation since the late days of World War II. He studied aircraft engineering at the Academy of Aeronautics off LaGuardia Airport's runway in New York City. After 2 years of the Air Force, he worked for a major airline for 34 years. He participated in an 8-year-long research project that involved collecting newspaper reports of UFO activity in the state of Delaware. Intrigued by his findings of approximately 750 cases over a period of less than 50 years in this very limited geographical area, Carl was further struck by the number of UFOs which were seen entering or leaving water. This is a feat which he knows to be impossible for conventional aircraft. Carl now runs waterufo.net, which is a website that collects and organizes information on water-related UFO cases. Carl, can you hear me all right?
Yes, fine.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I really enjoyed meeting you in Denver at the MUFON Symposium.
Oh, well.
But we didn't get much chance to talk about your work.
No, there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
But I'm very into this stuff, and I put a lot of work into it. I don't know if you've had a chance to browse the website.
Very slightly, actually, not nearly as much as I would have liked. What are some of the cases that you found really gripping, that really pulled you in?
There's quite a few. Of course, the biggest case is the Roswell, not the Shag Harbor, which is Don Ledger and Chris Stiles' bag. That was a case where the U.S. and Canadian navies sat over a UFO underwater, 60 feet of water, as a matter of fact, and for a week, not hours or minutes, seconds, a whole week.
Oh my God!
Before the thing finally left.
So wait a minute, Shag Harbor is
Nova Scotia.
I'm terrible with geography. Nova Scotia, okay.
Yeah. And
so a UFO was seen going into water.
Yes, nobody identified it as a UFO. A pilot flying from Halifax to Boston had said something exploded, and they thought it was an aircraft. But the commercial aircraft can't go diving after UFOs or doing maneuvers like that. So he just reported it, and meanwhile, two sets of teenagers driving towards each other on the same road. It's a very small road around Shag Harbor. They stopped and called the Canadian Royal Canadian Police, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and at first they were skeptical about it, but then they got more calls and from other people, and they came to investigate and saw the lights on the water themselves. That's when they sent out boats. Everybody was getting in their fishing boats, going out to do a rescue work, figuring it was a crashed airplane.
Mm-hmm.
but by the time they got out there, the UFO had already gone out toward the ocean from the bay, the harbor, and went underwater. And the following day, they sent out Navy divers to investigate, where this thing had crashed, and there was nothing there. So it was they just couldn't understand why the crashed airplane wouldn't be sitting on the bottom of the ocean. Mm-hmm. And it turned out, I forget, Chris Stiles could probably tell you, but it was a great deal of time after that somebody had mentioned something happening up at Shelbourne, and they had mentioned, well, it's kind of like the thing that happened at Shag Harbor. Well, that connected the dots, and then all of a sudden, bang, they found out the U.S. Navy and the Canadian Navy was sitting over this thing. And that particular place where it was sitting was a top-secret base, U.S. base, on Canadian soil. And it tracked submarines. Well, this UFO was kind of like a submarine. It was underwater and had gone from Shag Harbor up to Shelbourne, even though it was damaged. And then a second UFO joined it. So it's it's kind of an exciting story, and it beats Roswell by a mile, because I was curious. Chris had told me, he says, I've got documents on this thing. And I said, oh, what do you got, 10, 20 documents? He says, Carl, I got a 4-drawer file cabinet filled with Freedom of Information Act documents from the U.S. government and the Canadian government.
On this one case?
One case.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic thing. History Channel did a very good one on it. It was by a New York producer, and it's called The Canadian Roswell. And if you ever get a chance...
History Channel's big on Roswell.
Huh?
The History Channel's big on Roswell.
Well, yeah, well, they call everything a Roswell, the Texas Roswell and this Roswell.
Yeah, I had John Greenwald was on my show a couple of weeks ago, and, he did some programs with the History Channel, and he was saying practically everything he gave them for a while was called this Roswell or that Roswell.
Yeah, it was a series that came out.
Yeah.
But this particular one done by the New York producer, I highly recommend it if you ever see. They keep bringing them back again, so it's bound to pop up again. And if you get a chance, that's the one to see.
So it's called the Canadian Roswell?
Canadian Roswell, right.
On the History Channel, okay.
It is a Canadian Roswell. To me, it's a water Roswell. I have a thing on my index where I'm going to eventually fill in the information. It's just that I've been too busy to do it. But it's a fantastic case, although technically to me it's useless. I deal with water, and what water does. And in that particular case, it was nighttime, so you didn't see anything doing with the water. And they didn't report anything but foam. They found some yellow foam. And so to me, it was kind of a useless case, but it is a very important and well-documented case. So it is a very substantial case.
So was there something unusual about the foam?
Yellow. None of the fishermen had ever seen it before. And I had some other case. I brought it up to Don Ledger, and I said, this gal, she was an abductee, as a matter of fact, and said the water around her had turned, appeared to be yellow. And I said, gee, that's just like the foam, in the Roswell case. But you usually don't have too much on foam, because the UFO is usually some distance away, and people don't get to see the foam. So I don't know if it is a physical trait of some sort, but I don't know how many other cases might have that in it.
So it wasn't tested or anything? And, when you first mentioned it, my first thought was, well, the light was shining up through the water. I mean, it wasn't just foam that looked yellow because of the light?
No. The only lights they saw was when they were on the shore, and the craft was moving above the water out towards the ocean. Now, there were no boats in the general vicinity, so no one saw anything but the lights from the shore.
Okay.
But as it got out into the ocean, it went underwater. And the people didn't see any glowing lights underwater. They just saw the thing sink, and they thought the aircraft had, gone under. So that's when the rescue parties started going out to find debris and this, that, and the other thing, which, of course, they never found.
I can imagine what that must have felt like. They must have been sure that there were people there who needed to be rescued.
Oh, they did. They were very upset about it, and they thought for sure they were going to save some people. But it was highly disappointing that they found nothing, nothing floating, and nothing to indicate there was a crash. And so the mystery just kept building. What the heck was it, you know? And it wasn't until like weeks later that some of the stuff began to surface, and then it became even a bigger mystery because now it's no longer an aircraft. By that point, they were calling it a UFO. So it's a great case. It really is a great case. It's it's a little useless for me, though.
No, I'm interested in that. Why is it useless for you?
Well, I've always been intrigued by UFOs and what they leave behind. Like Ted Phillips, you're familiar with him,
Right.
I'm sure. He goes out and investigates impressions in the soil left by the landing gear, burn marks or calcified soil, it's chemically changed by the UFO, broken branches, and so forth. And I said, you know, Ted concentrates completely on land. But I said, I have never seen anything by Ted about water. So I said, you know, it's got to do something with water, the splash, if nothing else, you know, when they go in. So anyway, I started collecting cases. That was my, when I retired, like I said, I did the newspaper research, but that was 2 days a week, Saturday and Sunday, because I got free parking at the university. But that left 5 days a week of boredom, so I said, well, I'll work on collecting water cases, which I did. But I just kept collecting them, and you don't realize what some of the things are until you start, you know, digging cases up and seeing what the water's doing. And there's actually 4 different phases. And as a matter of fact, are you on my website?
I am, yes.
Okay, just scroll down and you'll see 2 columns. It says other topics of interest.
Okay, my computer is very slow today, so hang on a second here.
No problem.
Other topics of interest, okay.
Okay, now on the right-hand side, you go down like 3. It says physical influences on water.
Okay, now for anyone listening, this website that we're looking at is www.waterufo.net.
Right. Okay, click on physical influences on water.
Physical influences on water, under the heading of other topics of interest, okay?
Okay. Okay, now, you don't have to read that whole text. There's a lot of text in there. But as a matter of fact, this is the thing I got second prize for in the Best Evidence of UFO 2006. But when you scroll down, you'll come to some sketches. And the first sketch there is the water bulges. Now, that's about 5 or 6 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cases there, where they're talking about the surface of the water being pushed up before the UFO came out. The sea is flat, but where the UFO is coming out, the water is bulging.
Okay.
And as you can see by, this is a diagram that I drew, and it's a little bit, you know, of an explanation, but basically what you see there with the arrows pushing the water up, out, and down, and then around back in again, is a high-speed rotating field. So when this thing is coming up, that field is pushing the water that's ahead of the UFO up into this bulge. So it does correspond to what the UFO is doing. And then if you scroll down a little further, you've got part 2. I don't have as many cases on that one, but this is where there's a depression under the UFO. It's sitting almost at water level, and a lot of people have said, well, there was a hole underneath the UFO, or the water was depressed.
Now,
And,
that's something that you might see maybe under a helicopter, right, where air is coming down strong and hard and actually pushing the water away.
Well, you do see the water moving under a helicopter, but you don't see a depression per se.
Okay.
This is like you're taking a glass and pushing it down into soap water, soap water being waves and so forth. And when you look through the glass, you're seeing clear water underneath. And that's basically what the UFO is doing. Its field is actually in the water, and it's pushing the water down. actually holding the water off. That's on both sides of it, all of both sides of the sketch, but 360 degrees around. The water is not touching the craft ever. And I've got some duck details on that as well. Then when you go scroll down a little bit further, again, the UFO is higher above the water. And you see this upward swing of the field back into the UFO. And what it's doing is kind of like a suction on the water right at that point. Now, I only have one case of that, one case, but it's a fantastic case. And, well, no, actually I had two cases. There's another one I'll go over a little bit later. It's in Poland, and that one has all three of the things together.
Oh, my gosh. So the one referred to here in the article was from April of 1958?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, no, that one is done in South America. I think it was Brazil, I'm not sure. But that one was in several books, and it's just called mounding of water. But there was another one in Poland that has, like I say, all three. The bulge, the depression, and then the mounding type thing where it's sucking in water. And then if you go down a little further, you come to the big one. That one I have, I think, 11 cases on somewhere. And that's where the UFO is way up, well, not way up, but, slightly higher above the water, and you have a water spout going up to the UFO. The suction continues, on the surface. It's a rotating field, and what it's doing is causing a suction. And by the same token, usually one part of the UFO, either the rim or the bottom, is rotating, and that causes a vortex below the UFO. And so you do have this suction. And Bruce Maccabee has a photo in his book called UFOs Are Real and Here's the Proof. And Ed Walters had taken the photo of this thing across the bay, and it's very hard to see, but there is a water spout underneath that one as well, and that was in his book. So I usually use it for my presentations to show that it really does exist. So that's the physical part of it. And then if you go further on down, there's a picture of all four of them together, side by side, and that's the picture that I drew one night, 2005. It wasn't that far back. I was going nuts. I've got all these different types of situations where the water's bulging, it's depressing, the water spouts, and I'm saying there's got to be a connection somewhere. But there was nothing obvious. So having had some experience in aeronautical engineering, I have a drafting board left over, and so I started doing a drawing of it, and I made my own UFO and made my field, and then started drawing them one by one to see what they were doing to the water. When I finished, I was so flabbergasted by the drawing, to me anyway, because I've been working on this thing so long, and I couldn't sleep. It was 10 o'clock at night I finished this drawing, and I just kept looking up at the ceiling. I thought I was going to fall asleep, but I couldn't. I was just so stimulated. I finally got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and said, I can't sleep anymore anyway. I might as well start writing it. So that's what I did. So, I mean, this to me was what water is doing. This is like Ted Phillips' physical trace. It's moving water. It's doing physical things. It's not paranormal. It's not magical. It's real. It's physical. It's a craft. It really is a solid craft. And it's doing things.
So what kind of force...
To yet, of course.
I'm sorry. What kind of force could be affecting water this way? Could this be a magnetic?
Well, the field I drew is actually from that Brazilian one I told you where I only had one case. He did indicate it as a magnetic field. But, in ufology we always say, well, it's electromagnetic this and electromagnetic that. And I said, well, maybe not.
Well, right, but, I mean, it's a reasonable assumption since water is magnetic. I mean, water is susceptible to magnetism.
Well, salt water is, but that's not the reason for the field. The field is actually, this is something I've come to lately, is the field is has nothing to do with moving water or any kind of a physical thing on the things it encounters. It's a byproduct, strictly a byproduct of this rotating field, and the rotating field is a protection field. That's all it is. It's not your engine to go at 9,000 miles an hour or whatever. It's a protection field. If you're out in space and you're flying this little craft, and you're doing 9,000 miles in one direction, and meanwhile a meteor's doing 125,000 miles in another direction towards you, you don't stand a prayer, once the two collide. So they do need a protection field, and I think that's strictly what this thing is, and that's the reason they can push water. That's such a force. What's his name? Hines. Richard Hines. He wrote a book, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and he has 30 cases in it where people shoot at it, throw rocks at it, the UFO, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. And the reason being is this field is rotating it so fast that whatever touches the field is rotated right past it, right under it and back. That's the end of it. And that's what this thing is doing in space. Whatever hits it is being pushed around, down, and out of the way. It never touches the craft. So that's
Wow.
It came as quite a revelation to me.
Yeah. So it's not just the craft itself is revolving so quickly, or could that be how this field is generated?
No, the
Sounds
craft's
like
not revolving at all. The craft's not if you look at the drawing and you stick a bar magnet dead center of the UFO, a bar magnet. You've done Physics 101, I'm sure. And you have the North Pole, and when you pour iron filings on it, and you tap it, all the filings fall into this field that rotates around and back into the bottom of the magnet, the South Pole. And that's exactly what's happening. But this field is rotating at such a high speed now. I don't know how it does it. I have no explanation for it. But it follows that type of a field. I can't say what the field is composed of, how it works, or anything like that. But I know it's based on that particular drawing. It really does follow everything that's in that drawing is accounted for by the field.
wow.
So,
So this drawing was something that you came up with based on your research in about how many cases?
at that time I probably had about maybe 800 or so. But the thing was, I was trying to separate things. Well, I sat down one day. I didn't have anything. I don't have a database. So I had to go through each case, all 800 of them, and look for something that the water was doing. And so I finally came up with, okay, it's making water bubbles. I put down case number, date, and so forth. And then I'd find another one when the depression, I put that down. I don't have a whole lot of cases. I mean, right now I have 1,093 cases on the website. But the thing is, the amount of trace cases is very small because a lot of people, they're frightened by the craft to start with. I mean, this thing pops out next to your boat. You're not particularly looking outside the boat to see what the water's doing, what the fish are doing, or anything like that. You're terrified.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people just say something popped out of the water and flew away real rapidly. So you don't have a lot of data in the cases, which is kind of pathetic, in a way. I mean, I can't blame the people for being frightened. But so anyway, it only leaves you a little bit of data on what the water is doing. And like I said, I became very frustrated because I couldn't put the thing together until I did that drawing. And boy, that knocked my socks off. And I can explain land cases. As a matter of fact, I think I have a section in there. I think it's in green, in green text. I have non-water cases down. And these are all cases where it's doing things with that vortex that's underneath of it. And of course the vortex explains why it's doing these things on land. We can get out of this thing for a second here. Go back to the columns. There's a very famous thing down there called water nests. That's on the right-hand side, too, down towards the bottom.
That sounds like the crop circles, and they used to call those saucer nests.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And this one is very famous. It was the Tully water nest, and that report was by Bill Chalker, the international UFO reporter. And the best part of the water nest thing is this farmer sees the UFO pop up above the tree line beyond him, and beyond that is the Tully Lagoon. And so anyway, he watches the saucer while he's on the tractor, and then the UFO shoots away. Well, he's curious. He gets off the tractor. He goes through the tree line and over to the lagoon, and bingo, there's a circle of water that's rotating very slowly, and the reeds are gone. All the reeds are gone.
Mm.
And so he goes back to his tractor, continues, and then I guess around lunchtime he goes back to the circle just to take a second look at it, and all the reeds are there now. They all came to the surface.
Oh my
In other
gosh.
words, the swirling water was like a, what do you call it? I can't put the name down.
Well, you know what? I completely lost track of time because I was so fascinated listening to you. Let's take a break.
Okay.
Just for a couple of moments, and my producer's trying to tell me we need to take a break.
Okay.
So let's take a minute, and we'll think about that for a second. Gosh, this is fascinating.
Okay.
Don't anybody else go away. We're going to be right back with my guest, Carl Feind. We're talking about water UFOs, and oh my gosh, I'm just really into this. I'm Karen Dolan. This is Through the Keyhole. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Through the Keyhole with your host Karen Dolan on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm your host, Karen Dolan, on Through the Keyhole, and we're talking with Carl Feind today about water and UFOs, and he runs a website called waterufo.net. If you guys are available to a computer right at the moment while you're listening, hop over to his site. It's www.waterufo.net, and take a look at some of the pictures we've been talking about. He actually has drawings that he's made showing some of the effects on water of UFOs as they enter and leave. And Carl, you were telling us about a story, and we blanked on the word whirlpool. So now that we've come up with whirlpool, where were we? You were talking about
water nest.
the water nest. Yes.
It's N-E-S-T-S. Doesn't come out in pronunciation too well.
Yeah.
But in any event, what we were saying was the farmer had gone over to the where the UFO had shot away from the second time, and all the reeds had come to the surface. Well, what happened was, while it was low and creating this whirlpool, it's sucking all the reeds down with it, down to the bottom. And reeds aren't fastened very tightly. They don't have to be because they're getting the water near the surface. So they were all whipped around at the bottom, and finally when he went back at noontime, he saw all the reeds on the surface. And they were all arranged in a radial pattern, excuse me, hiccups, and they were all in a circular, in a circular mode. And so anyway, evidently the water had slowed down and all the reeds had come up to the top. So now you did have a crop circle. And this is one of the few, as a matter of fact, I think it's the only one, where somebody actually saw a UFO leaving a crop circle. I have no idea of anybody else who's ever seen a crop circle actually being formed, or the UFO leaving it. So this was a very important case to me in that respect. It's only one case that I know of that has a water nest, although they did have many water nests in that general area. Evidently they had quite a few UFOs leaving that area. But it's very important because it shows again how the UFO is operating, the vortex underneath it anyway. So,
it's interesting because I have a friend, actually. When you said that, that reminded me that a friend of mine went over to the UK and to Wales about, 10 years ago.
uh-huh.
And when she returned, she told Rich and me that she had been in a plane approaching the airport, and she looked out, and in fact, I think the pilot mentioned it and told everybody to look out. She looked out her window, and they could see a crop circle forming, but they couldn't see a craft or anything. She said she was looking all over the place to see what was doing it.
Well, MUFON actually had an article a while back, and I'm kind of into that, the way they explained it. It's kind of like a tornado type thing, only on a smaller scale, and it's ionized air that's rotating at a high speed, not from a UFO, but just from natural means, just as a tornado is natural. But this is in a kind of a tornado that goes tearing up buildings and stuff. It's a smaller one, and so I'm more on that. And another thing too is these fancy ones that have all the what do you call it, fractal geometry.
Yeah, they're not
very
just circles.
fancy type things. I don't think they're UFO created. The vortex under a UFO is circular. It's strictly circular. And when you see a circle, yes, that's a UFO. When you see designs, that's not a UFO. At least what it's to me anyway. I have yet to see anybody prove that, they make the designs.
I haven't done enough research on crop circles. I have to have somebody on the show sometime to tell me about them. But I do remember reading that in some of the crop circles, and what I consider to be the true ones, they study the stalks of the plants, and they look like they've been heated and that they've exploded from inside.
Well, that is a very important part of the UFO. Like I said, this field is ionized. At night, you have colors going through it, and you don't see the UFO per se most of the time. It's an electrical field, and it's changing the atmosphere around it that touches it. And if it's touching the atmosphere and changing the atmosphere, it certainly is changing plants if it's close to the plants. Now, when these things come down, they don't necessarily have to land. They can be just above the plants, a very short distance, and that field is touching the plants in that case. So you have an electrical field that's touching the plant and causing these explosions within the plant. So no, I go along with that point. There's no question in my mind that UFOs do cause crop circles and all these magnetic properties that people have attributed to the crop circle too.
And that raises some questions, too, about, I'm thinking of Bud Hopkins' work on his most recent book, Sight Unseen, where he talked about UFOs being invisible in certain cases,
Well,
and how they might do that. That they apparently have, like some people might see them and then they just blip out of existence, and saying, well, do they go to another dimension, or do they phase somehow, or do they have some kind of a shield that goes up? Is it, like a cloaking device like they talked about on Star Trek? Maybe they actually do have it. And if you're talking about heat, that just reminds me that you can have mirages where an image will bounce off, light will bounce off heated air. It's like when you look at a road in the summer and it looks like there's water on it.
Oh, yeah, a mirage, yeah.
Exactly, that's just light bouncing off very hot air.
Well, I forget what year it was. I think it was 2004. Elaine Douglas did a presentation from MUFON on invisible UFOs. And me and my friend were about to walk out. We said, oh, God, this is going to be terrible, But we hung for 5 minutes, and then the next thing you know, we watched the entire presentation. She had one particular case where a guy had both a infrared camera and a video camera, both on the same, what do you call it, platform or rod or something. And he was taking pictures for some, I forgot the reason. But in any event, as they're swinging the camera around, you see nothing, then it hits the side of a building, and then you see it both in the infrared and in the video cam. Then as he comes back off the building again, he's aiming more towards the sky, and then all of a sudden, bang, the infrared has a target, and there's nothing on the video. like I said, this field is hot. No, I guess I didn't tell you that. That's another paper I'm writing.
Yeah.
It's called Heat and Water UFOs.
Well, we were talking a little about the heat with the crop circles, about the plants being affected by heat.
That's true. That's true. I have the same kind of thing I did with physical influences, though, with heat and water UFOs, and it's proof positive. I mean, it melts ice. It turns rain into steam. As a matter of fact, it turns salt water into steam too. And what else? I've got hundreds of cases where you hear sizzling, hissing, boiling. If you go onto my site and you go to, what the heck was it?
I was just going to ask if these cases are available on your site, if someone wants to do further research in this area.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to do. If you go to the list of sightings page, that's that first block at the top.
Okay.
And you'll see all the dates and stuff, master list, and right below the master list it says, keyword here, the search engine. All you have to do is type in BOIL and search. And you get cases up the kazoo that have boil in them. And each one has to do with boiling water, boiling the steam.
Oh, wow.
Heat is another word you can put into that search engine, and heat will bring up a string of cases.
Well, I just put in boil, and I got this long list.
Exactly.
The earliest is 1927. Wow.
Yeah. And heat does the same thing. If you put heat in there, you'll get another list just as long or longer, I think. I know I have a ton of these things, and it shows that field around the UFO is extremely hot. And have you read Cash Landrum?
I haven't read that, but I've discussed the case with Rich.
Oh, that's a fantastic book. John Schuessler, who was the international director, he's resigned recently, but he's still active in MUFON. He wrote the book, and he did the case. And what happened there was these people were in Texas in the middle of winter. They've got the heater on, and they've got coats on. And this UFO comes down the road, and so the roads in Texas are kind of strange. You know, if you go off to the side, you go down a cliff practically. You know, it's a real deep ravine. But in any event, they stopped the car for fear of going off the road, and meanwhile, the UFO is coming down towards them. So Betty gets out of the car, and she goes to the front fender to get a closer view of the UFO. Well, she goes back to the car and burns her hand on the handle of the car because the whole car has been heated by the UFO. Right. So she had to use a coat to get inside the car. And inside the car, they had taken off their coats and turned on the air conditioner, showing that it was hot inside the car. So this heat from the UFO is something terrible, you know, especially if you're up close to it.
Yeah,
so,
people who...
I have no doubt about it. But, of course, that's when the field is operating. If they throw the switch and turn the field off, it's almost the opposite regime. You get the cold. You feel cool at best.
Now, does there seem to be any correlation with whether the field is on or off and what the craft is doing?
Well, I don't have any physical... Well, yes, I do. I have one case. It's not on the website right now.
I mean, does it seem like the field is usually on when the UFO is moving and it's off when it's landed or anything like that? Is there any sort of correlation?
It's usually... well, no, I can't say there is a correlation because it depends on what the occupants want. Sometimes there is a field on because there's people throwing rocks or shooting guns. And,
so they're not really dependent on each other.
No.
It's not like they can only use the field while they're moving, or it's an effect of their propulsion system or something like that. They can be separate. Okay.
There's one particular case, and that's in Paul Hill's book, Unconventional Flying Objects. And it was driving me nuts. I'm saying, you know, this thing is hotter than Hades, and yet he's got ice forming on the lake. And I'm thinking to myself, how the heck can ice form on the lake? Well, if you have a thing, usually these are saucers, and if you have a circular thing inside the saucer, that's conducting electricity, and you have it at absolute zero. I think that's 474 degrees or something like that, below zero. There's no molecular motion, and electricity flows like water in that thing. It just zooms around. Well, evidently they had the field off while they were hovering over this pond or whatever it was. Now it's raining, temperatures above zero, above freezing, and yet this lake freezes, solid. It freezes so hard that water from rain that hits it instantly turns into ice. There was no water on the surface of the pond.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a whole lot of things that point to how the field operates or what the field is doing. So, I mean, if you turn the field off, you're going to feel cold. And a lot of people who have been inside a field, you know, they suddenly say, oh, you couldn't hear crickets, you couldn't hear traffic, you couldn't hear anything. It was like total silence, you know. And you say, how do you explain that? Well, again, when the field is on and you're inside the field, nothing is coming through that field, nothing. And so I think the only thing you can get is light through. But in any event, that kind of explains why people inside the field feel cool, and yet if you're outside, you feel like you're boiling, you know, you're hot, you know. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of cases in a section I call, what do I call it?
See, it's hard having all this great information on your website. You have to remember all the headings.
It's basically those two columns. If you go to those two columns, there's a whole lot of stuff to read. There's a whole lot of reading material.
It would take forever to go through all of this, but it's definitely worth it. There's some great information on this site.
Oh, thank you. The one I'm talking about is up close and personal. Now, these are cases that I love, but, you know, they are no good for me. It's kind of like, you know, you don't want to throw them in a trash barrel, but by the same token, you don't want to let them go. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of like my strange things, and it's not doing anything with the water. And I have a couple of cases in there where boat captains are watching this glowing object coming up to their ship and circling it. And in one case, the boat captain says, I thought the boat was going to catch fire. He was inside the cabin. He said it was so hot in the cabin. He says, I couldn't picture why the boat wasn't catching fire. And again, another, testimony to the fact that these things are hot. And I can't figure whether it's, like I said, the field is rotating extremely fast. Now, that could be friction with the atmosphere or something else. And
That's true. You always hear about, when people talk about meteors, when they reach the atmosphere or the space shuttle returning to the atmosphere, that they'll have to be shielded against the heat.
Well, it's movement through the atmosphere, and of course, if this field is rotating in the atmosphere,
right,
it'll be doing the exact same thing. It could be producing heat through friction.
Yeah.
But, of course, we have nothing definite to depend it on. And the funny part is that Cash Landrum thing, Betty Cash, they all came down with radiation poisoning. And Betty got the worst dose. She was in the hospital 8 times. And John Schuster has all the medical records on it. And the other two in the car weren't affected as badly. They did come down with a slight case of radiation poisoning. But Betty had the worst, hair falling out and everything else. And so it does give off radiation. And again, in Paul Hill's book, Unconventional Flying Objects, he's got several examples of radiation measured with an instrument of a UFO.
Yeah, that's fairly common, isn't it, among people who witness UFOs, that there are physical effects like radiation poisoning, but there's just reddening of the skin and irritation of the eyes.
Uh-huh.
That's one of those things that, until you really get into it and start reading a lot of the literature, the guy in the street who only knows about lights in the sky wouldn't know that.
Exactly. I mean, when you get the skeptic there, the first question you want to say is, okay, give me the titles of the books you read. Mm-hmm. He'll probably come up with nothing, But
it's usually, everybody knows those aren't real. So.
Yeah. I have to do this. Up in the top of the columns there on the left-hand side, abductees in water, okay?
Okay, wait a minute. We're back at the main page again.
Abductees
in water. Okay, under topics of interest.
I'm going to advertise it in advance. I wrote an article for the Journal of Abduction Research, JAR.
Oh.
And I got 3 different abductees talking basically tunnels. They're in a tunnel underwater.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it reflects on the fact that the seal's holding the water back. But I think that there were also bases. That was the other part of it.
I was just about to ask, what were they going to when they went through these tunnels in the water? I mean, because we had Richard Sauter on a few weeks ago talking about underground and underwater bases.
Bingo. I have both of his books. He doesn't have UFOs per se in the book. He has underwater tunnels, and it's mainly drilled by us, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But these abductees have been taken to bases. Now, the one gal I had, Anna Jameson, she evidently had a, what do you call them, the hypnotist, regressive hypnosis.
Oh, okay.
She didn't know much about UFOs, evidently, and when Anna was talking about being in the water, she had a very short paragraph about the thing, and she said she was in a tunnel. Well, the gal who was doing the hypnosis didn't drag it any further and didn't know questions to ask her, so she just kind of ended the session there. So where Anna went after she was underwater, we don't know. So this is one of the problems, is if you don't have somebody who specializes in a particular area, like Ted Phillips. I mean, if you got something that comes down on the ground, the first thing you're going to do is email Ted Phillips.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to do photographs, you do Maccabee. But the thing is, evidently this gal had no knowledge of what was going on and was just recording, whatever Anna Jameson was talking about, and didn't take it any further. So it kind of got lost there. But in any event, I had... what's her name? Wilson. Katrina Wilson. She has an online book now. It's free. It's free for the reading. And I went through it, and it's in PDF format. So
what is the name of her book?
I looked for water, and I looked for bases, and I got both. So anyway, I emailed her, and next thing you know, bang, we got the tunnel effect with her, except she called them 2, and we got the bases. And I said, oh my God, here we are yet again. It just keeps like repeating.
Wow.
So I'd love to get into Jacobs or Hopkins files, find out how many people they have with the same kind of a scenario.
Yeah. What is the name of Katrina Wilson's book?
Oh,
if someone else wants to track it down, like I think I want to now.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to the Fund for UFO Research thing at the end of October, and just going to give that a plug too. That's being held at the Anne Arundel College in near Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay, someone's saying I forgot what I wasn't supposed to remember.
Bingo.
Okay.
I forgot what I wasn't supposed to remember. Right.
Okay.
And
Thank
it's a
you,
free
Gossamer.
book online. You don't have to pay a cent for it. All you have to do is download it, and you've got a book to read. And she's the one who had told me about it, and I got her book. I got that from Amazon.com, The Alien Jigsaw. And, I got to read that, too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Gossamer, one of our listeners, put this up, put up her name and the title and the website, alienjigsaw.com, so that's where we can go to find the book. And believe it or not, it's time for another break.
Oh, okay.
The show is just flying by today, Carl. This is fascinating. And I'm getting almost no comments. I'm like tapping on the message board here saying, is anybody even here? I can see there's a long list of people listening, but no one's talking because they're all fascinated as much as I am by what you're saying.
Okay, well, I got something for you when you come back.
Okay. Well, we're going to take about a 9-minute break, I think is usually what we do at the top of the hour. So don't go too far away. Everybody can take a minute and go get a cup of coffee or something, but be sure to come back. And this is Karen Dolan. I'm Through the Keyhole. My guest is Carl Feint, and I just can't get over how much really great stuff we're getting today. I've never seen the message board so quiet. It's like nobody's saying anything because they're just gripped by what you're saying. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes, everyone. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Through the Keyhole. And my guest today is Carl Feint, and he's giving us some really fascinating information on UFO cases relating to water. This is UFOs entering or leaving water. And these are on his website at www.waterufo.net. And just before we went on break, Carl, you said you had something you wanted to tell us about when we came back.
Yes, earlier we had talked about the electronic field and what it does to water and so forth, but then we got into the abductees, and I was just wanted to say, I just recently purchased a book by Katrina Wilson called The Alien Jigsaw, and I was breezing through it to find whatever I could on water and bases. Well, I was kind of stopped in my tracks when I got this one. She's got a UFO flying over her and her father. And it says, now it has stopped, and it's landing in our backyard. It just blinked out. Now, we had talked about this invisibility type thing a little while ago. I can't really see it anymore. I can only see some strange type of electrical current or static that is flowing around the craft. It is sporadically emitting electricity, and as it does, it follows the contour of the craft. So I can just make out the outline. And then she says, oh, I know them. Of course, she's an abductee, so she would know. But there again, she's confirming the electrical field. So everything is connected. There's another guy who wrote a book called UFOs and Anti-Gravity, Leonard Camp. In any event, he says all pieces of the puzzle, and that's basically what you're getting here. You're getting pieces, and once you make the connection, they're real. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that for that part.
I was really struck by our conversation through the whole first hour. We kept finding just like everything we talked about seemed to be a piece of something that someone else talks about.
Yeah.
And it really did feel like all of a sudden we're discovering we have all these puzzle pieces sitting on the table in front of us, and we keep saying, oh my gosh, and there's another piece that goes with this, and there's another piece that goes with this. And then we did the crop circles, and we talked about Bud Hopkins and his book Sight Unseen. We talked about invisible UFOs. And I kept thinking of Ivan Sanderson. Of course, he wrote books about water, UFOs going in and out of water.
Well, I've been taught well. This thing I'm doing in Anne Arundel College, I've got Bruce Maccabee, Richard Hall, Don Berliner, the two Swiateks, and me. I'm on part of the totem pole that talks to worms, So in any event, I kept thinking about it. I said, I'm in here with all the big guns, and I'm the smallest of the guns. And but they're my teachers. They wrote the books initially, and they're the books I've read and gained knowledge from. So a lot of this stuff is not repetition, but insight because of what they wrote. So all these people we want to call ancient ufologists have done a wonderful job of building up a reserve of knowledge that everybody can purchase anytime and get, matter of fact, most of my cases are from either them directly or from organizations they've worked for, like MUFON or NICAP or APRO. So these are very important people, and I appreciate what they've done for me. So where would you like to go now?
Well, I have a question, and also I have a question from one of our listeners.
Okay.
Someone wrote in on the message board. I just wanted to ask quickly, you're talking about a lot of the cases you investigate came from certain people. How do you get these cases? Do people call you up and say, I have one that I want you to investigate, or that I thought you might be interested in?
There's two barrels to that. People who know me will phone me or send me an email or something like that. But I've investigated non-water cases as well. I'm Assistant State Director for MUFON in Delaware.
Okay.
And as such, if a report comes in from a Delaware resident, they automatically email it to me to investigate, me and the State Director. And so anyway, I've done several cases. I did one just a few weeks ago with a gal who saw a triangle. This was 2 years ago. She didn't get any response from another organization that she had sent the message to, but she was petrified. She said for a month she couldn't move. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't sleep at night. She was terrified by her experience. She was alone in the car. The thing was right above the car and had extremely bright lights, perfectly silent. We don't have that technology, so, and she knew it too, and she was terrified. Finally, the thing just moved off slowly, and she stayed until it was a good distance away, and then she gunned the car home. But
well, knowing what we do about the radiation sickness and the burns that people undergo, it's good for her that she did stay in the car.
It's a kind of a curiosity because, again, this is a craft flying at night with no ionized field around it. So I think there's different kinds of engines for different craft. And the ones that come out of the water, go into the water, it seems most of those are, what do you call them, saucers. But the triangles, they fly around at night. I've seen more reports. None of them seem to have a glowing field around. They have lights. They have very intense lights, but not a field like around a saucer. So there might be different engines on these craft depending on what the things are. Like I consider a saucer to be a scout craft. It's sort of like a Piper Cub or a small maybe fighter or something like that. Whereas the triangles are more in like a medium-range bomber classification or something like that. They're bigger, they're more ominous, but they might have a different type of engine system. But again, no matter what, I don't even know what the Saucer's engine is yet, so I'm still digging from the outside in, and I haven't gotten that far yet.
That's what we're all doing this for, right? We're all, trying to collect information and collate it. And
Exactly.
That's what I think is so fascinating. I'm so glad that there are people who will specialize. They'll choose one kind of case or sometimes one particular case.
Yeah.
And they'll dig and dig and dig and dig, sometimes for years, to get information out about that.
Yeah, it's both positive and negative. I mean, there's a guy down in New Zealand, Peter Hassel, who does ball lightning in regards to ancient ships and so forth, and he collects all the literature he can on that. And that's positive because you're getting knowledge about what ball lightning cannot do, say almost fire and whatever have you. So that's good too. And then we have another researcher, Taylor, first thing, but he does what's called satellites. Not satellites like we know them, but the small craft that rotate around a mothership. And this is kind of like the saucers coming out of a hangar in the mothership and flying around. That's the reason I consider these big, what do they call them, cigar-shaped things. They're huge. Some of them have been over a mile long. And it's kind of like an aircraft carrier, only a space carrier, you might call it, because they're carrying spaceships inside their body.
Wow.
It's amazing. And there are a lot of people doing various little pieces of research that they're interested in. And like I said, the only reason I got into water was because I took the aircraft engineering, and I bent metal, I did fabrication, I did rivets and all that sort of stuff. And as strong as metal is, you don't put an airplane down into the water because the wing's going to break off, and it's a denser material than an atmosphere. So it's not designed to go into water; it's designed to go through atmosphere.
Yeah, it's funny how hard water can become when you hit it full on like that.
Well, if you want to experiment, all you got to do is go to a 10-foot board and dive out on a belly flop.
I was just going to say, anybody who did a belly flop as a kid knows exactly how hard it can be. It can feel like cement when you hit it like that.
You're not kidding. Boy, do you get a red belly off of that one.
Oof.
No, it is a liquid. It gives way easily if you're just slowly rotating your hand in it. But if you're hitting it with any force from any altitude, that thing is concrete. You might just as well rip your plane to pieces doing it. But no, it's quite interesting, and that's what promoted me. I said, if a UFO can go in and out of water without the slightest hesitation, I said, I want to know why it's doing that. And,
now, does a saucer go into UFO, go into a... No, wait a minute. What am I trying to say here? Does a saucer go into water, just flat, like with the flat side striking the water, or does it tilt to go in at an angle so that the narrow side goes in first?
It's kind of hard to say. They do a whole lot of different things. They're not really concerned about the water. The field is taking all the pressure.
Okay, so they don't really seem to have to worry about turning at an angle and slicing into the water, which is how we would need to do it if we were going in.
Yeah, no, they're perfectly content to do it whatever way they want. But one thing I did find out is, and this was actually in regard to the abduction field too, because all of my cases that I've told you about, the coming out, the bulging, this stuff, and the other thing, are all, going north, going vertically, in other words. I don't have any going in the water. Now, the reason I stayed away from that is because you've got a lot of people making mistakes. Meteors go into the water. You've got space junk going into the water. You've got flaming aircraft going into the water. So I said, this is something I want to stay away from because there's not much that comes out of water except for flying fish and Polaris missiles. So I said, you can usually distinguish, a UFO from either one of those two. So, but then I went into this abduction thing, and these people are talking about going into the water, and they said it seemed like we didn't even bump. We didn't even make a bump as we went in, which you would expect, and they're going in at speed. And so again, I had to look at the field, and I said, well, the way I've got the field drawn, it can't possibly, go in without a bump, because A, it's going straight for the water, and then the field is going straight for the water. You're going to have a tremendous splash. Well, then I thought, well, what happens if you reverse the field? Bing. What happens is it's pushing the water out of the way. Every molecule of water that comes in contact with that field is being pushed away and back. And it doesn't impede the UFO at all. It's like cutting butter. He's going right in, with a warm knife, of course.
What I was thinking is, also from the abductee literature, is when people describe being taken out of their homes. They walk through walls.
Well, that's the beaming up. Actually, History Channel did a pretty good thing about backing engineering UFOs, and they brought up the fact that if you could have a big enough computer, you might be able to identify every molecule that's in your way towards to get to the abductee. And then, you say, okay, I don't want this stuff. And then you got the same beam going to the abductee, and you say, I do want that. And so all the molecules on the abductee are brought through the wall because everything's atoms, and one atom is passing another atom. And
it could actually be like water passing through a sponge.
Yeah. And the best example of that is a book called The Allagash Abductions. I don't know if you read that one.
Now, that was in Maine?
Yeah, well, I think it was, yeah.
There were 4 boys who were camping, I believe.
Exactly. And they were out on a canoe, and they got beamed up to the craft. But they didn't realize that until years later, I think it was. And when asked about how they felt in the beam, they said, I felt like I was being pulled apart. Well, they were. Their atoms were or molecules were being separated, and so that they could be passed through the bottom of the ship. They didn't open a door. They just beamed them up through the bottom of the ship. So, I mean, it almost sounds like science fiction, but it's physical. It really is physical, and they have the technology.
Yeah, but science fiction is just someone's idea of something that later someone else figures out how to bring into reality.
Exactly, yeah. No, there's more reality to UFOs than anybody can possibly imagine, and they've been with us for a very long time. So I'm not particularly frightened by them. I'm sure if I met one alone on a country road, I might be a little anxious about being beamed up or something like that. But other than that, they return people, so it's not like they're, they've returned most of the people.
Well, yeah,
on my website,
let
me go back. I got one for everybody to read. There's got nothing better to do tonight. Go back to the main home page. Use the back button, and you can go back to the main page. and then scroll down to the other topics of interest section. And on the left-hand side, there's a thing called Book, the Antilles Incident. It's a very short book. It's 180 pages, but actually it's paragraphs, 180 paragraphs, and it comes out to 44 type pages. But in that particular case, 3 guys got beamed up because they were shooting, ramming, and what do you call it, depth charging a UFO.
No.
I guess they got a little ticked off. Anyway, at one point, they beamed up 3 of the crew members that were in the water, and they didn't come back. So, not the abductees usually come back because they're innocent people, but these were part of a war machine, and I guess they were kind of ticked off and said, we're going to take captives or something. But it's a very interesting book, and it's done by an excellent researcher, Todd, who had his own files. And myself and Jan Aldrich were trying to get hold of the files, but the family's got them locked up for one reason or another, and we didn't even answer the letter I sent. So kind of put a stopper on that. How about Dead in the Water? You want to go to Dead in the Water?
So you haven't had an abduction experience?
No, not me. I haven't even seen a UFO.
So this is all collating things that other people have seen and reported?
I'm sorry?
So all the information on your site, these are all reports from other people who've seen them. You haven't actually seen them. That's funny because Rich is always saying, he's written about UFOs, and for years he was like, I've never seen one either.
Well, actually, I did 2 of the cases on my website. One I was asked by, as a matter of fact, the guy who just wrote a very good book called Strange Company. His name's Keith Chester. And Keith is in Maryland, and one day he had a case report by a witness down there who was talking about a UFO over, I forget the name of the reservoir, East Baltimore. And in any event, he says, I've never conducted an interview, so he says, would you mind coming down and doing it? So I did. And this was a thing of a water spout going up to the UFO. So I was very interested in that. And then I had one where a friend of the family from my childhood was entertaining my sister and brother-in-law, and they asked, well, what's Carl doing? And they said, oh, crazy Carl's doing UFOs. Well, then she said, let me tell you about the one I saw. So anyway, this one was coming down the island, and this is in the Admiralty Islands down in the Pacific. And it's just above treetop level, and then suddenly it makes a sharp left and goes into the water. Well, the natives were trained to go out in their canoes real quick and rescue Australian pilots if they would gone down in the water. So they were Johnny on the spot. They jumped in there, tried to find this thing. They couldn't find it. Whatever went into the water kept going. So there you go.
Wow.
But those are the only 2 cases I've got as water UFOs that I've done. But they're both on there. They're both there. If you put Carl Flynn into the search engine, I think it'll come up in one of those cases.
Okay. I did promise to ask you a question earlier from one of our listeners, and you sort of just led into it. Someone wants to know whether you've looked into many of the cases reported off the California coast near the Catalina Islands.
Oh, I forgot his name. Yes, I have. Not that I've particularly looked into them. I've gotten all the cases that come from there. Again, if you go to list of sightings page and go to the search engine and type in California, how many do we come up with? Woohoo! A whole mess. Well, that's a big coast. Good God, that thing's long. And Catalina, if you want to specify Catalina Island, you could specify Catalina Island, and it'll bring up all the ones in Catalina Island as well. But Preston Dennett, that's the name of the guy. He's a researcher in California, and he's written a couple of books. And he asked me one day, he said, can I use some of your stuff? So I said, yeah, sure. But Catalina has got C-H-V-A-L-I-N.
Yeah, I just pulled that up, and I got 4 cases.
4 cases?
Yep.
No, I got more.
So those are all Catalina
I just put in
Island.
Catalina. I got a whole mess of them.
Okay. And
Oh,
on that note, we need to take one more break.
Okay.
Boy, the show is just flying by. So, okay, everybody who is at a computer, here's your assignment. Put in the Catalina Islands and see what you guys come up with. And we will be back in probably about 2 minutes, so don't go too far.
Okay.
This is Through the Keyhole. I'm Karen Dolan, and my guest today is Carl Feind. We're having a fascinating conversation about UFOs going in and out of water. And we're checking out his website, www.waterufo.net. See you in a few minutes. I wouldn't lose it either. That's my big thing. Can I talk about your book?
I'm sorry?
Can I
Welcome
ask
back
you about your book?
to the Keyhole with your host, Karen Dolan, on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Can't hear you over there.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back from break. This is Through the Keyhole. I'm your host, Karen Dolan, and my guest today is Carl Feind, and he's been giving us some fascinating information on UFOs going into and coming out of water. His website, for anyone who didn't catch it yet, is www.waterufo.net. And what was it you told me in Denver about that? It has to be .net?
Oh, you can't catch a water UFO without a net.
Exactly. That's, you know what, I was so glad you said that, because otherwise I'm just so used to putting .com, and I would never have gotten to your site through.
That's the only reason I use that extender on it.
Oh, it's great.
I could have done education, I could have done com, but I figured it would be a good joke, you know.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm still just blown away by the amount of really amazing information that's on here. And I felt bad at first that I hadn't had a chance to go through your site before, but now I'm really glad, because now I'm getting this guided tour. You know, you're showing us where everything is on this. And I'm just amazed at the amount of information. Now, when we left off, we were talking about the cases, well, we were looking at cases off the Catalina Islands and the California coast.
Right. Well, I mean, you can do that for any place in the world. My website is not confined to the United States, so you can put in any country, and bingo, it's going to be in front of your face.
Wow.
If you go through the search engine. And I mean the whole world, including the oceans. It'll come up with whatever ocean is around. But
even landlocked Switzerland.
Yeah.
That was on the break, I think, so probably your listeners wouldn't have heard that. He was saying that these UFOs are near water everywhere in the world. And if you want to look in landlocked Switzerland, go to Lake Geneva.
Bingo.
There
You can just type in Switzerland, and it'll come up.
Wow.
So, it's unbelievable. They fly into just about any kind, like a pond, which are small lakes, and so forth. They pop out of just about everything. So, they're very slim craft, They're most 30 feet wide, but they're only like 10 feet high.
So these are the saucers you're talking about?
A saucer, yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't require great depth. You know, ships probably couldn't travel in the same area that UFOs do and still be, underwater. Matter of fact, that's one of the problems. I got another site called Totally Submerged Objects, and I hate that one, because if you can't see it, what makes you think it's a UFO?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a whale or anything else. But in any of that, there are some cases in there where the Navy has said you couldn't possibly have a ship there, and yet natives have seen the ship there. And that beep, I think, is my battery.
Oh, uh-oh.
I might have to go to a landmine.
Well, we don't have a heck of a lot of time left on the show. The way the conversation is going, that just made me think of one of the first books I had ever read on UFOs and water, and it was one of Ivan Sanderson's books. And I'm trying to remember now which one it was.
Invisible Residence.
Invisible Residence, that was the one.
Hang on for 2 seconds.
Sure.
I got another hand phone that I can switch to, and here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now I'm off on this one. good. Okay, now we're back in
Okay.
business again. Yeah, Ivan C. Sanderson was kind of like my idol. When
Now,
I
he
first
was in the
started getting
Navy.
into this stuff, I noticed in books, from the 60s on, that you'd have one water case. And I'm saying, good God, the guy's going to get one case and he hasn't explored the importance of it. Well, as the years went by, you might have a couple more or whatever. But in 1968, Lorenzens wrote a book, UFOs Over the Americas. They had a chapter, 10 pages of water UFOs. So I said, when are they going to get to the book? Well, 2 years later, Sanderson wrote Invisible Residence.
And there was the book that you've been waiting for.
Yeah?
I believe it was in that book, he talked about a small craft that came down in an odd sort of way, and this is, I think, different from the falling leaf style that people have mentioned, the sort of rocking back and forth. He said a craft came down, and people who saw it said it really looked like it was in trouble. It didn't just look like it was doing that rocking motion.
Yeah.
And it went into, I believe it was a river in South America.
Oh, yeah. I have that on my website, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and it was similar to the Shag Harbor incident, and they thought it was a craft with people on it, and so people on the shore tried to go and get to it to rescue anyone who might be there, but they were not able to find it.
It definitely went upstream. This was a kind of a river, I think, or stream or something. I forget how big it was, but they said all they could find was mud where it had gone in. And of course, they're not thinking the thing went upstream or anything like that. So they're looking for it in a place where it actually went into the water, figuring it crashed. Well, it didn't crash. It just continued on, which these things do. They just keep going underwater. One of the things they said, why water? Well, if you're flying in the atmosphere, radar is tracking you. All over the globe nowadays. If you go into the water, no radar. Radar doesn't go underwater. Sonar does, but you'd have to be on a ship that's close proximity to the UFO for sonar detection.
Right, we don't have sonar available everywhere all the time. It takes time to go and get a ship that has that equipment and bring it in.
Exactly. So for a UFO to stay out of sight, if it wants to, it all it has to do is go to the nearest body of water, lake, reservoir, stream, you name it, and boom, it disappears. And then it can swim out from there to any direction it wants to go.
And another thing that struck me about that case was it seemed as if the craft went down into water because it was in trouble.
Well, it hit a palm tree, and evidently that might have knocked it off balance. They said it wavered because of that, and then went into the stream. It might not have been its objective to go into the stream, or maybe it was going to the stream and just didn't see the tree and bumped it, But either way, if it was in trouble, it would have been sticking out of the mud or something, but it didn't. It just kept going. So it wasn't in trouble. It's kind of like that one in Shag Harbor where the thing, even though they saw an explosion in the sky, it continued to go on its own to go up to Shelbourne.
Yeah, and Sanderson speculated that, maybe it went into the water to hide, and it did go upstream and then was seen leaving. A few days later, was it, or as much as a week later?
Where it went in, but they're not looking for it upstream, so when the thing pops out of the water, it spins away,
Right, so it could have been to hide. It could have just been lying low for a few days, but it could also have gone underwater in order to effect repairs, and he was speculating that maybe there was something about being in water that was either necessary or facilitated making repairs on the craft.
I don't know.
And, that's what I just found it so fascinating, because we really didn't have enough information to say, is it this or this or this? But I always loved Ivan Sanderson's way of thinking, because he really would pull out all the possibilities.
Yeah, well, you have to look at everything.
Exactly, and so few people do that. They come up with one theory and then say, well, this must be what happened.
Yeah,
and he would always say, well, here are 4 things that could be the reason for this, and I don't know which one it is.
Of course, I know what happened.
Right.
I guess we all get into that bracket where, you're so convinced by your own thoughts about what's going on that, you can't see anybody else's particular point of view other than your own. But,
you know, it makes sense to try to put forth your theory or your analysis of, you know, what are the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But Ivan Sanderson always impressed me as being one of the few people who could really collect all the information that was there and then say, okay, it could be any of these 4 or 5 possibilities. And I can't go beyond that because I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he got into this thing about the underwater civilization, which is kind of like the movies thing, you know.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I have water UFOs at the movies on my website. And there was that one, The Abyss, where...
Oh, I saw that. That was wonderful.
Yeah, and of course at the end the thing comes to the surface and all the ships are resting on the UFO.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of Sanderson's impression, that a city below the ocean or something like that. But that has never been seen, and we've been dragging the ocean with all sorts of cameras, this, that, and the other thing. So I really doubt that. But a base inside...
Well, there's still huge areas that we're not able to see. I mean, as much as we're trying, and we are getting down there and getting some information out of it, there's just so much.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, there are bases, I'll give you that. I mean, the abductees have seen them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not like a civilization. That's what Sanderson was trying to say, invisible residents. They were part of our planet, part of our, not culture, but our co-inhabitors. And I don't see that. I think we're more like a stopover through the universe. We're the only planet in this solar system that has liquid water. Now, I mean, if you're on a road map and you're going to the desert, you know, you're going to say, hey, there's a, you know, stream over here or a pond or whatever, then you're going to note that pond in case, you know, you run out of water. And so I don't doubt that we're on some kind of cosmic map, you know, and in this sector, this planet called Earth has liquid water. So, you know, they pop over here for whatever purposes. As a matter of fact, yet one more, taking on water, under topics of interest, stacking it conventional. That's where the guy knocks on your door and says, hey, can I borrow a cup or a bucket of water?
Yeah.
You know? And there's several cases, in many cases, of that type of thing where the aliens are asking people for water, either for the craft or themselves. Or, the other one underneath it, taking on water unconventionally, that's more a part of that physical influences of a UFO on water. That's the sucking up water thing. And that got broken off in the early part of my research. But taking on water is evidently a necessity for any life form in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's got the bacteria that exist in sulfuric acid, but there's water in that as well. So I guess we all need it.
I guess so. I'm getting a couple of questions from listeners about the area underwater around Puerto Rico, and also someone else mentions a lot of lights underwater have been seen in the Bermuda Triangle. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about those two. What about Puerto Rico? Found anything interesting
Puerto
there?
Rico, you want me to answer the question now?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Puerto Rico, I had quite a thing going with Martinez, Jose. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to the search engine. He supplied a lot of material for me. And he gave me permission to use his cases.
I'm doing a search on your site here while we're talking. I'm looking up Puerto Rico.
No, well, that's why I just put all the Puerto Rican cases up. Scott Corrales had a book, Flashpoint, High Strangeness in Puerto Rico. He did an excellent job. As a matter of fact, it was a fun. My problem is I can hop from case to case. He had one case in there where the guy had the inverted field that I was telling you about. The water was coming out of the top of the UFO, and no, it was coming out of the bottom of the UFO and being sucked in through the top, which is the opposite way of the way I demonstrated for a UFO coming out of water. So he had the field reversed. And but George Martin, he's the one who's written many articles and done research down in Puerto Rico. And all you have to do is go to the sightings page and type in that search engine, Puerto Rico. You're going to have a whole mess of cases that come up that deal with Puerto Rico. Now, one thing I should point out is when you put in a city or something like that, that city might just be mentioned in some passing way in the text, but it will pick up that city wherever that text is, you know.
Okay, because I was going to ask why when I put in Puerto Rico, the first one I get says 30 to 50 miles off Norway. Thinking,
Pittsburgh, yeah.
huh.
But Puerto Rico's in there somewhere. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's find Puerto Rico.
Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Then, well, what about the
Sometime
Bermuda
in
Triangle?
1963, the same year as the Preston episode, the U.S. Navy was conducting anti-submarine exercises off Puerto Rico.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it does mention the city. It's just a matter of, you know, getting it whether the case applies to Puerto Rico or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just mentioning something. So.
Okay.
But there are a lot, especially the Scott Corrales ones. They're definitely good for Puerto Rican. He specializes in Hispanic sightings, South America and Central America. And he does a very good job.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left. What are your thoughts on the Bermuda Triangle? Have you come across many cases of lights underwater in the Bermuda Triangle? I had not heard that before.
There's lights all over the world in water. My problem with Bermuda Triangle is you're putting a triangle down somewhere. History did a thing with Lloyd's of London once, and they said you can put a triangle on any part of the globe, and you'll have sunken ships. As a matter of fact,
Well, right, but I mean, there's an unusually high number of disappearances in that one area.
well, that's a pretty popular fishing area.
Well, that's what people think.
Vacation area and so forth. So it's and that's the Sargasso Sea, I think. That's Sanderson, and you can wind up in a lot of problems there. And weather fluctuates around the Florida area pretty violently. But I'm not a big fan of any of these triangles. The last guy tried to get me into this Dragon's Triangle, which is off of Japan. I have one case, and that's from Berlitz on the Dragon's Triangle. But, I mean, it's a legitimate case. It's just that he's named it the Dragon's Triangle. And I said, well, you know, I put all these darn names down for areas because they're all over the world. They're not in one area.
Yeah.
But that's the way I feel, of course. Of course, anybody else writing a book on Bermuda Triangle is going to contend, you know, go the other direction.
Okay. Well, now that's something I want to look into because I hadn't heard about it, and I've got people asking me, and then you've spent all this time studying UFOs in water, and you're saying, oh, it's not an unusual. Well, that's because you found all the cases every place else, too. See, the rest of us didn't know about all that.
Well, that's true. I mean, unless you have a basic knowledge of what's going on, it's like me trying to do triangles. I know very little about triangles per se. I mean, I've read a lot, and I've read about triangles, but I'm no authority on it. Now, Don Ledger, he's specializing in triangles, and I just sent him a case report the other day, as a matter of fact, and the one I did down in Delaware. So he's the collection agency for that part. But I'm relatively ignorant of what they look like. I mean, I know they're triangles, but the lighting system, what things stick out of them, and this, that, and the other, I have no idea.
Okay.
But I do know about water.
Okay. Well, I know I'm going to have to get back and read Ivan Sanderson's book again because I only have vague memories of it, but I distinctly remember really enjoying it. And I'm going to have to read the Katharina Wilson book that we were talking about. I forgot what I wasn't supposed to remember.
Yeah.
I'm going to look that up, and that's at alienjigsaw.com, you said?
Well, I'm sorry?
That's at alienjigsaw.com?
Alien Jigsaw, no, Alien Jigsaw is a separate book that she wrote that is published.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to buy it from Amazon.com or something like
okay.
that. But the one that's going for free, that's on the Internet.
Okay,
that's the
that's
one
PDF.
I forgot what I was supposed to remember or whatever it was.
Okay.
So, she's a fantastic person, and she's not looking to make money because that book is free, and she has quite a bit to say. Whenever I read a book, I stick a 4x6 index card in, and whenever I hit something, I write down the page number and usually put a mark next to the paragraph that I'm interested in. And I have quite a bit, and I'm not even halfway through the book yet.
Wow.
So she had quite a bit to say, and that's about UFOs, not about the abduction part, which is also interesting, by the way. So I'm sure she's a bona fide abductee. I have no doubt about that.
Okay, so we all have our homework now. Got a bunch of books I need to read.
There's a test tomorrow. Did I tell you that?
I'm sorry?
I said there's a test.
It will be. I was afraid of that. Okay, and we are just about out of time. Carl, thank you so much for being on the show today. This has just been fascinating.
Oh, very happy to do it.
And it's so nice to talk to you again. I had such a great time meeting you and spending time at Denver at the MUFON Symposium.
It was fun to me, too. And don't forget to send me that URL you were talking about.
I will.
Okay.
I will send you some pictures. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to listen today. And you guys were all very quiet, but I got a couple of good questions. And thanks to Gossamer for putting up all these links for us. Every time I said, oh, what's that link, he just popped right up with it. So that was really terrific. Okay, so a little reminder, everybody, I will not be broadcasting a news show next week, but I'm going to ask Joe to replay the Penn State Paranormal Research Society show, which was the debut of Through the Keyhole. And that's going to get everybody all fired up for their conference that's coming up October 18th through the 21st in Pennsylvania. And thanks once again, Carl Fine, for coming onto the show today and giving us all quite an education in 2 hours. And if anybody hasn't checked out his website, go do it now. It's www.waterufo.net. And thanks, everyone. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you, Carl. Okay.